Well, it's that time once a week when we go out to the other coast of the United States. On the West Coast, check in with Michael Snyder. He's down in Hollywood. That's where they make those fucking movies. So he's going to review those fucking movies. Hi, Michael. Oh, excuse.
They are a laugh. They really are worth derision sometimes, but there are a couple of good ones. And they come down the pike when given a chance. So let's just roll with the first of the big blockbusters.
Before we go on, let me tell the audience that if you hear pounding, it's because they're building next door in my apartment house, and I can't get them to shut up. So anyway, go ahead. Just like I can't get you to shut up, but it's far more pleasant. Okay, go ahead.
Thanks. Okay. Are you ready for another idiotic, craptastic movie based on a popular video game? No, me neither. I can't think of one that was actually good. Resident Evil, maybe? No, that was pretty bad. But anyway, I had to see Rampage, which is a new movie based on a video game, and it concerns forbidden genetic experiments by a villainous corporation that result in the creation of 3 gigantic and enraged mutations. Think Godzilla and King Kong sized, and in fact, one of them is a gorilla. In any event, they threaten to destroy humanity, or at least a CGI version of Chicago, unless stopped by a primatologist who happens to be ex-Special Forces, of course, played by Dwayne Johnson, The Rock himself, and a scientist, played by Naomi Harris, who you might remember as Miss Moneypenny in the Daniel Craig Bond movies. Anyway, with Johnson in the lead, you figure there's a certain level of charisma involved, but he was so much better in a much better movie that actually makes fun of video games and has fun with certain video game conventions. That update of Jumanji, that was like seeing Citizen Kane compared to Rampage. Meanwhile, Rampage is directed by Brad Payton, the same guy who directed The Rock in another apocalyptic action movie with over-the-top special effects, the California earthquake disaster flick San Andreas, which, despite being a dud, was less disastrous than Rampage. Anyway, George, who is the gorilla in question who mutates, is initially kind of a sweetheart who signs with Johnson's character and really likes him, but once the crazy gene juice gets into George, watch out. Alas, even the CGI, largely the work of the same blue ribbon computer animation company, Weta, that did King Kong by Peter Jackson and did Kong Skull Island. This CGI looks schlocky. The designs and such are totally video game level, and even George looks like a cut-rate version of Kong in those other movies. The cast list is deceptive. You got talent like Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Malin Ackerman, and Jake Lacey going through the motions. I mean, if you like the idea of Morgan's Negan character from The Walking Dead as a government spook, that's all he does in Rampage. As for me, the best part of Rampage was game over. I was also disappointed with the other major genre film coming out this weekend, and that's it's billed as Blumhouse's Truth or Dare. Blumhouse is a boutique production company that specializes in horror films, and they think by putting their name in front of Truth or Dare, they're going to pull in fans. It doesn't really make one bit of difference because the movie sucks. Like Rampage, Truth or Dare is a disappointment, and actually more dull, of course, even if both scripts are poorly written, filled with plot holes and generally ridiculous. In fact, an actual game of Truth or Dare, as a colleague said, would probably provide more thrills and horror than this film. I mean, I dare you to see it, but the truth is it's feeble and not worth your time or money, despite a couple of good moments, a few scares, and a good performance by Violet Bean from TV's Flash. She's Jessie Quick as the best friend of the female lead. And here's the point. She carelessly gets all of her college buddies trapped in a cursed and deadly game of Truth or Dare during spring break in Mexico. And it's, it ended up being quite a bore. I really don't recommend it. You know, you want to be caught up in these things. You don't care about these characters. And again, the scares are minimal. A better film, a much better film, is Beirut. And Beirut as period political thrillers go, this one is solid, tense, and still quite timely. It's set largely in the Lebanese capital city of Beirut, initially in the 70s and then the 80s. Essentially, there's a character named Mason Skiles, played by John Hamm, and he's a former diplomat, and he's called back into the business in Lebanon years later, when a friend of his is trapped by a terrorist cell, and he's specifically asked by the terrorists to do the negotiations for his release. It gives Hamm and Rosamund Pike and even Dean Morris complex roles that they can really enhance with depth and passion and purpose. Rosamund Pike is a CIA agent. Hamm and she are teamed up to find a way to get his former colleague out of this horrible circumstance. There's mystery here. There's the international intrigue and the spectrum of perspectives that go along with the battle against terrorism in the Middle East. And essentially, Hamm's character's life has gone to hell, and it's cause of the Civil War. So, you know, he's kind of out of the picture until he's pulled back in. I got to say, very impressed with the film. Screenwriter Tony Gilroy wrote and directed Michael Clayton and the screenplays for the first 4 films of the Bourne movie, and also actually wrote Rogue One. There's quality here. The director is Brad Anderson, and I thought Beirut was definitely worth checking out. And it'll also play well at home if that's your pleasure. So thankfully, an antidote to movies like Rampage. Another antidote, and one that you can get streaming on VOD this weekend, and it's, of course, also in theaters in New York and L.A., Borg versus McEnroe. This is not your standard sports biopic or inspirational docudrama. It's more of a textured character study of 2 legendary tennis rivals, particularly Borg, with the backdrop of their first meeting in the Wimbledon finals in 1980, which was Borg's attempt for an unprecedented 5th championship. All that stands in his way is this upstart brat of tennis, newcomer John McEnroe, played here by noted a-hole Shia LaBeouf in a perfect feat of casting. He responds with one of his best performances in memory. But again, most of the focus is on Borg, his life, his training, and his relationships with his fiancée and his mentor. It's exceedingly different from another tennis movie of recent vintage, the comedic Billie Jean King versus Bobby Riggs movie, Battle of the Sexes, but it's as good in its own way, if not better. In fact, Sverre Gudnason is a dead ringer for Borg. I mean, it's amazing. And LaBeouf is not quite such a twin of the young McEnroe, but he's close enough and so good in the role that it doesn't become an issue. You also get the incredibly talented and well-regarded Stellan Skarsgård as Borg's mentor, directed by Janus Metz, written by Ronnie Sandal, in Swedish and English and French. It is partially subtitled, but man, I really was impressed with it. I give high marks to it. Maybe it's not your cup of tea, but certainly worth a look at a stream. The Rider really was powerful, inspirational, and very poignant, with serious real-life heartbreak on display, written and directed by Chloe Zhao. It takes real people in a real circumstance, Native American cowboys in the upper Midwest, and it just tells a heartbreaking story, possibly absolutely heartbreaking. Brady Jandreau is a former star on the rodeo circuit who gets injured and thinks he's never going to get back on a horse, but wants to. And you see what he has to do to try to get back to what he wants to do. And you see the real friends in his life and the real family that he has to deal with. And I have to say, I was blown away by it. One of his buddies has such a serious injury that he's almost fully paralyzed. And the guy, this is all from real life as well. So it's kind of this, it's almost like a docudrama, but they scripted the thing, but you don't think of it as a scripted thing. It seems so vital and real. And again, it's an absolute reflection of what happened to these people. The Rider blew me away, but again, it's a sad, sad film on some level, despite the moments of inspiration. Finally, I want to talk about one more genre movie that's much better than Rampage and much better than Truth or Dare, even though that's not saying much. Wildling is a pretty satisfying little movie that mixes coming of age with horror, as Belle Powley, who was in Diary of a Teenage Girl as the teenage girl, and A Royal Night Out as Princess Margaret during the end of World War II. She's here as Anna, a girl raised by a gruff father figure in seclusion outside a small Pacific Northwest town since she was an infant. When she's finally brought to the town, or what passes for civilization, she's in her teens and she has a hard time fitting in for obvious and some unusual reasons. She's taken under the wing of a local police officer, Ellen, played by Liv Tyler, who I haven't seen her in a while, and she's quite good here. And she finds support in Ellen's teenage brother. But her origins and her strange upbringing catch up to her. It's a bit of a horror film. It's really well executed, written and directed by Fritz Boehm. It's his first directorial effort. Yeah, man, Wildling. I think you can probably catch that streaming from IFC, but it's also going to be in some theaters, and I thought it was very cool. What have you been watching, buddy?
Nothing really. Oh, there goes the hammering again. Shut up! Jesus Christ almighty. Anyway, did I mention the Gary Shandling documentary on HBO?
It's fantastic.
Done by Judd Apatow. It's probably the best thing Judd Apatow has ever done. It's amazing. It's amazing. And I also watched the Andre the Giant documentary, which was good. It wasn't great, but it was good. So that's what I've been watching.
The Expanse is back. I'm excited about that. And a couple other shows are coming down the pike. But I guess that's it until next week for me.
Yeah, okay. So tell them where they can find you, okay?
On Twitter at Culture Blast and on Facebook at Michael Snyder's Culture Blast page. And at the movies, generally.
Say that again because I had the music up too loud.
Oh, Culture Blast is on Facebook, and you can also go to Twitter at Culture Blast.
And you can go to this on Roku as well, and you can also find this on our on-demand. Thank you very much, Michael. See you next week.
You bet.